Everything in this universe works according to the law of balance. Everything in this universe is in resonance and alignment with the harmony of balance. In other words, nothing can exist without balance. If there's good, there's bad. If there's light, there's dark, and so on and so forth. But the idea here is, how do we get to such a point of balance where we transcend the illusion of separation between good and bad? How do we transcend it through the awareness that one cannot exist without the other, and therefore they are not two separate things? In this episode of Forming the Formless, episode 6, I'm going to be speaking all about the harmony of balance. Understanding how within every failure there's a seed of success. How within every perceived destruction there is a seed of new creation. How within every beginning there is an end, and within every end there is a beginning. How yin and yang are not two separate things, but part of the same whole, and one cannot exist without the other. And when we understand this, we transcend the illusion of separation, and it makes it a whole lot easier to tap into universal awareness. My name is Jason Shurka, and this is Forming the Formless, accessing and elevating your spirit and soul. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Forming the Formless. This is episode 6, all about the harmony of balance, the law of balance, understanding how everything exists because of everything else. And when we understand this foundational principle of how the universe works, it will help us see through the illusions that we believe in our day-to-day life, because we forgot the principles that the universe is built on. This one being the law of balance and the harmony of balance. So to start, I want to read an opening quote of this chapter in Forming the Formless, because of how powerful it is and how it really shows that balance pertains to everything, not just good and bad, but how balance within ourselves helps us reach a whole new level of purity. The quote goes as follows, and it's by the Dalai Lama. Happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from this foundational teaching when it comes to the harmony of balance and the law of balance, it's the fact that being coherent and congruent on all dimensions of your beingness is the most important thing that you can do when it comes to living a balanced life and living in harmony with your highest potential. I want to start this foundational teaching about the law and harmony of balance with a story that I'm actually going to read to you from Forming the Formless. It's actually on page 78, about an experience that I had when I first came to realize how within every destruction there is a new creation. And in that way, one is not separate from the other. They are one and the same because they happen simultaneously. They occur together. So the story goes as follows. I was walking through the forests of Northern California, and suddenly out of the corner of my eye, I saw a tree engulfed in flames. Out of curiosity, I approached the tree to see what was happening. I quickly realized that it was the beginning of a forest fire. Scared and afraid, I ran as fast as I could from the flames. I made it back to my car and successfully got out of the danger zone. Safe and sound, I had some time to reflect on what just happened. The only emotion I could experience was gratitude for getting out of there safely. A few months later, I felt the need to go back to see what I thought would be a site of destruction, and so I did. What I saw was not a site of destruction, but a site of new creation. Since the trees burned, they were no longer present to block the sunlight from reaching the ground. The ground that was nothing but dirt and soil a few months ago was now blooming with life. Grass, flower, and plants were all beginning to sprout. I quickly understood that without the fire, the ground below the trees would have never bloomed. This experience caused me to see the world in an entirely different light. I immediately connected to the balance of the universe. Within every destruction, there is a new creation. Within every end, there is a new beginning. This is the harmony of balance. So, what I really want you all to take from this story is how what we perceive as bad also has a lot of good. What we perceive as the end also begins a new beginning. What we perceive as destruction also marks the beginning of a new creation. In other words, in our lives, when one door closes, another one opens. Knowing this, understanding this, living according to this will help us all experience and help us all really alchemize and transmute what we experience as negative experiences into the positive lessons that we can learn from those experiences and thus teach others from what we learn from those experiences. Balance is all there is. The only time where balance is no longer perceived is when the ego starts leading. And what does the ego do? It labels things. It labels things as good and bad, creation, destruction, birth and death, beginning and end. We spoke about this. So how do we transcend the illusion of separation that the ego creates and tap back into the law of balance and the fact that balance is all there is? Well, back to what we shared a few episodes ago in terms of how the ego works. In order to transcend the ego, we need to start working on not identifying things, not labeling things, seeing things as what they are. Labeling is the ego in action. If we want to tap into the law of harmony, the law of balance, the harmony of balance, what we need to do is stop operating through the ego. Again, the ego has a time and a place to operate. But if we believe that the labels that we give something are what it is, we limit creation, we operate and live according to the illusion of separation, we will therefore experience things like corruption, like greed, like war, like hate. And it will simply be a counterproductive life that not only is led by the ego, but also causes us to not see the balance in everything. And if we can't see the balance in everything, then the bad times that we experience will become a whole lot worse because we can't see the good and the seed of success and health in everything that we experience that's perceived to be a negative experience. So I want to speak about the idea of yin and yang. And I want to explain why and is the expression and the reflection of the illusion of separation that we live according to. So for those of you who don't know what a yin-yang symbol is, I want you to either Google it, look it up, and if you do, then hold that picture in your mind's eye. Once you have that yin-yang in front of you and you see it very clearly, pay attention to it. Observe it. You're going to see a light side and a dark side. And within the light, you're going to see a circle of dark, and within the dark, you're going to see a circle of light. And you're going to see this perceived line that so-called divides the light from the darkness. But if you start spinning that yin-yang symbol, Alan Watts says that it looks like two fish that are always trying to eat each other on a never-ending cycle and a never-ending loop. But one side cannot exist without the other. And if one side cannot exist without the other, then that means fundamentally There is no difference between the two, meaning it is not two separate things. And therefore, it is not yin and yang. It is simply yin yang. They are one and the same. That symbol shows us how without the darkness, you will not have the light. Without the light, you will not have the darkness. That symbol is also a perfect expression of how we operate in physical reality, in this physical matrix, because we all know that fundamentally, everything comes from the same source. That means that everything is one. But we as spiritual beings having a physical experience need to experience things in form of physical division. But again, that's the ego leading. So it's not bad to operate in the physical realm and operate in the matrix, so long as you remember that everything comes from the same place. And the harmony of balance and the law of balance shows us just that. It helps us transcend the limitations of the ego that tells us this is good and this is bad. It helps us dissolve all of these labels and identities that we give things arbitrarily. We gave definitions to things. Good and bad, and what is good and what is bad doesn't exist outside of our belief systems. Therefore, it's a reflection and an expression of us. Now, to take this a step further, I want to show you how the lack of the law of balance and the lack of the awareness of the law of balance can lead to a very poisonous life, can lead to a very toxic life. And once I explain that, I will show you all how to transcend that toxicity through awareness. So what I'm about to explain, I like to call the poisonous illusion. The poisonous illusion is something that we all do, including myself. It's part of being a human being. We're not always aware that we're doing it. The key is to be aware that we are taking part in not only an illusion, but something that is toxic to our day-to-day life. So I'm going to give you an example of something. It may not pertain exactly to you. And if it doesn't in terms of the example, then I encourage you to simply pay attention to the principle that I'm trying to convey through giving this example, because the principle applies to everybody. So, have you ever heard somebody say, when I have X, I will be happy? The example that I'll give is, when I have this much money, I'll be happy. A lot of people that are struggling with paying their bills, not being able to pay certain things on time, not being able to afford certain things. The common thing that I usually hear is, when I have enough money to do this, I will be happy. And the illusion is that you are not happy because you can't do X, Y, and Z. You can't pay your bills. You can't go on the vacation that you want to go on. You can't take your husband on or your wife where you want to go. You can't buy them the things you want to buy them because you're not experiencing financial abundance in this present moment. So again, I hear a lot of people say, when I have more money and I'm able to buy my wife or my husband X, Y, and Z and able to go on this trip and this dream vacation and I'm able to pay my bills and I live in a mansion, I'll be happy. Now let me tell you what happens when you live according to that illusion. Let's say the time comes where you have enough money and you live in your mansion and you're going on every vacation you've ever dreamed of. And you're buying your husband and wife whatever you've ever wanted and whatever they've ever wanted. And you have all your bills paid on time. And you can do whatever you want. Well, you're soon going to come to realize very quickly that your issue, your negative emotions and your negative feelings were not rooted in the fact that you don't have enough money. It was actually rooted in your emotions. So now you have the house, you have the trips, you have the money, you have the physical possessions, you have all of it. You may not have the problems of not being able to pay your bills, but you will still have issues in your life because you didn't solve it from the root. You see, the problem that you experience in your external circumstance is not the root of the issue. It's actually an expression in your external reality of what is going on within. And the key here is that you cannot solve anything internally through external means. More than that, true bliss is when your internal joy and happiness has nothing to do with what's going on in your external reality. So the law of balance states that with more X comes more Y. And it's how we label each that dictates the quality of our experience. Again, operating through the ego is a limited experience, but operating from the soul is a limitless experience. Your internal emotional poisons like worry and anxiety cannot be dissolved by external means. And the more external means you obtain and possess, the quicker you will come to realize that. That cannot solve the issues that you are experiencing that are rooted from within. So how do we dissolve these emotional toxins? How do we dissolve these poisons? I want to give you the analogy of a tree. Picture a tree, a big, thick tree with a big, thick trunk and tons of branches and tons of leaves. The root of the tree represents your thoughts and your beliefs. The branches of the tree represent the circumstances of your life. By saying, when I have enough money, I'll be happy because I can pay my bills and go on vacation, do whatever I want to do. What you're pretty much doing is trying to cut off the branches of the tree because they're poisoned, only to come to realize that the branches will grow back. They may look different, they may have a different form, but they're still going to be diseased, toxic, and poisonous. Why? Because the poison and the toxicity does not root in the branches, does not stem from the branches. When you cut the branches off the tree and you see that more poisonous branches are being grown and are growing out of that trunk, what is the conclusion? And the conclusion is very simple. The toxicity comes from the root of the tree. And therefore, if you're not dealing with the toxicity from the root, then you can cut branches off all you want. You're not fixing the problem. And that's why trying to fix something from external means is simply going to the level of the effect instead of the level of the cause, going to the branch instead of the root. Remember, the root are your thoughts and your beliefs, and the branches represent the circumstances of your life. So now we go to the most important point of how do we transcend this poison. And I'm going to give you all an exercise after first giving you all the concept of what you have to know here. We're going to move from concept into experience, from mind into heart, from ego into soul. Listen to this very closely. Resistance, acceptance. Resistance is your poison. Acceptance is your key to freedom. Resistance is what's limiting you. Acceptance is what has the power to put you back in harmony, in alignment, and in flow with a natural, limitless, abundant, eternal, and infinite flow of divine intelligence and divine creation. The power of acceptance is something that most people don't remember, they don't pay attention to. But the power of acceptance is what can help us really tune back in to that divine flow of creation, that divine intelligence, within each and every one of us. So in order to help you remember the power of acceptance, in order to help you remember why it's so important to tune back into acceptance, I want to give you all yet another analogy that will help you see this very, very clearly and bring acceptance back into your life. I want you to visualize your mind as a river. A river that's flowing and flowing and flowing until one day a big barrel of toxic waste is poured into that river. What would happen if you started freaking out and you blocked the exit to that river because you said, oh my God, I have to deal with this right now? You pretty much built a dam. Well, that's what resistance does. Resistance builds a dam in the river. And what happens when you build a dam in the river after pouring toxic filth and waste into it? Well, you stop the flow of that river, you keep the toxicity there. Resistance stops the flow of creation, and it causes you to experience blockages, and it pretty much causes you to experience an accumulation of toxic waste within yourself. Acceptance looks at that toxic waste, says, okay, it's here, it's in the river. How do we get rid of it? Well, we don't panic and we don't build a dam. We accept it and we let the river flow. And as you let the river flow with your acceptance, toxicity will filter itself out. It will move through you, and you will once again be in flow with the divine flow of divine intelligence and purity of creation. To transcend resistance, we have to stop giving labels to our experiences. Big picture, we are always one experience richer. It's not about good or bad. It's not about negative or positive, because when we start labeling things as good or bad or negative or positive, it's easier to operate in resistance, because the ego will start panicking, saying, oh my God, this is bad, we have to do something about it right now. And the truth is, you don't have to do anything. You just have to sit there, be quiet, sit in your stillness, silence, and pure presence, and allow everything to flow as it must. The lessons will come to you when you allow yourself to sit in pure stillness, silence, and acceptance. Again, there's no good, there's no bad. You are always one experience richer. So to bring this teaching, this foundational lesson, episode 6 of Forming the Formless, all about the harmony of balance, to a close, I want to give you all an exercise to leave you all off with, to do after you watch this episode. And I encourage you all to watch this over and over and over again, because you will see things differently as you watch it over and over and over again. The exercise that I want to share with all of you is called One Experience Richer. And what I'm going to ask you all to do is get a pen and a paper, sit in silence for a moment, and try to go to your very first memory. From your first memory up until today, I want you to draw a graph of your growth, emotional growth, spiritual growth, physical growth, from your very first memory up until today, with whatever you can remember. As you draw it, you're going to come to realize, very interesting, just as I did when I drew my graph. Of course, it's a positive sloping line because you grew since your first memory. But it's not a smooth line going up. The trajectory is upwards, but it goes up and then down a little bit, and then higher and then down a little bit, and then higher and then down a little bit. What are these high points and what are these low points? When we operate out of the ego, we say the high points are good and the low points are bad. But when we operate from the limitless nature of the soul, from the awareness of the law of balance and the harmony of balance, the high points are no longer the high points and the low points are no longer the low points. meaning they're not good or bad. They both have to exist in order for that graph of growth to occur. So instead of labeling the high points as good and the low points as bad, let's shift our perspective into what they actually are, not what we think they are, not what the ego wants to label them as, but what they are. Again, they cannot exist without each other, so both are equally as important. The low points are where you gain new tools and lessons in your life. And the high points are simply where you apply those lessons. And if you forever try to stay in a place of the low point, you will always be in a place of stagnation. But that's the same as if you always try to stay in a place of the high point. You have to travel through both in order to grow. So again, the low points are where you accumulate new tools and lessons in your life. Once you accumulate that, you now go to the place of your high point where you are applying that. And once you apply that perfectly and exhaust those new tools, you have to gain more tools. So you go back into the point of your life where you will have to be put to the test in order to gain and accumulate new tools. And that's how it moves. The problem is most people are afraid of the low point. And by being afraid of the low point, because the ego labels it as something bad, forgetting the law and harmony of balance, what we do is we stay in a place of stagnation always. And that simply limits our growth. So as you draw your graph of this one experience-richer exercise, I want you to see the high points and the low points for what they are. From the perspective of the soul, as opposed to the perspective of the ego. Dissolve the limitations and the identities that you give things. And do your best moving forward to see things for what they are. The more present you can be with what's in front of you and what's within you, the more apparent it will become that all is one and balance is the only thing that truly exists. Remember that no matter what experience you experience, you are always one experience richer. In the next episode of Forming the Formless, episode 7, I'm going to be speaking about the importance of diving within, diving deep within in order to understand how everything works within so you can see the reflection of those inner workings in your perceived external reality. I look forward to sharing that with all of you and continuing this incredible journey of learning the foundations in order to understand and see past and see through and transcend above the illusions that we've believed to be true for so long. My name is Jason Shurka, and this is Forming the Formless, accessing and elevating your spirit and soul. I'll see you all next time. Subscribe. Hey, thanks for watching this video. There's so much more I'd like to dive into, but unfortunately, we can't do that here thanks to the heavy censorship efforts from big tech. If you want to explore this topic further, you can dive deep by accessing our entire uncensored library on unified.tv. There's a link in the description below this video if you want to check it out. A membership to Unified TV gives you unlimited access to hundreds of uncensored podcasts, investigative journalism, documentaries, films, and content that was once available on major streaming platforms like Netflix, but is now banned from the internet. For just $14.99 a month, which is less than $1 a day, you get access to it all. Your subscription also helps keep the platform running free from censorship and corporate influence. Please consider supporting us and enjoy all of our unfiltered and thought-provoking content in return. Thank you very much, and I will see you on Unified TV.